Hey! Get away from her right now!
The water was cold, heavy, and smelled faintly of chlorine and old iron as it rushed into my lungs. Up above the surface, through the distorted blue light of the high school indoor pool, I could see 3 faces looking down at me. They were laughing, holding their smartphones high to capture every second of my agony. To them, I was just Maya, the quiet freshman girl who sat in the back of the classroom, wore oversized hoodies, and never said a word when they pushed her in the hallways. They thought I was drowning because I was weak, because I was terrified, because I was their latest victim. What they didn't know as my lungs burned and my heart hammered against my ribs was that every second I stayed beneath that surface was a choice. They didn't know about the 5 grueling years I spent in the mountain academies of Okinawa, training 6 hours a day until my knuckles bled and my knees gave out. They didn't know that my grandfather was a high-ranking master who taught me how to disarm a full-grown. To understand how I ended up floating at the bottom of Oakidge High's Olympic-sized swimming pool on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, you have to understand the life I left behind. 3 months before I enrolled at Oakidge, I lived in a small, fog-covered village near the coast of Japan. My grandfather, Master Hiroshi, was the only family I had left after my parents died in a car crash when I was 8 years old. He didn't raise me with soft words or warm blankets. He raised me on wooden floors, bare feet, and relentless discipline. In his dojo, speed was survival, and strength was a quiet burden you never bragged about. He taught me the art of empty-hand combat, not to fight, but to survive, to control my fear, and to understand the precise mechanics of the human body. Rule number 1 of his training was absolute. You never use what you learn to hurt someone unless there is no other choice, and you never reveal your power to impress fools. Except high school wasn't safe. Oakidge High was ruled by an unwritten hierarchy, and at the top sat Marcus Vance and his inner circle, Chloe and Sam. Marcus was 6'2", built like a brick wall, and held every sports record in the county. His father was the chairman of the local school board, which meant the teachers turned a blind eye whenever Marcus crossed the line from teasing to cruel harassment. Chloe was his sharper half, a girl who used words like scalpels to dissect anyone who didn't fit her idea of popularity. Sam was the follower, the guy who did the dirty work just to feel like he belonged to something powerful. From my very first day, I decided to become invisible. I wore baggy clothes, but bullies have an instinct for silence. They confuse quietness with weakness. It started small during my second week of school. A foot stretched out in the hallway to trip me as I walked to biology. I absorbed the impact effortlessly, converting the fall into a smooth roll that looked like an awkward stumble to the untrained eye, but Marcus noticed how quickly I got back up. A few days later, my locker was spray-painted with insults. I didn't cry, I just bought a bottle of acetone and scrubbed it clean before the first bell rang. My calm reaction seemed to frustrate Marcus even more. To a predator, a victim who doesn't show fear is an insult. He wanted to see me break, to hear me beg, to prove to everyone watching that he owned the school. The tension reached a boiling point on a wet afternoon in late October. The final bell had rung, and the hallways emptied quickly as students rushed home to escape the pouring rain. I stayed late in the library to finish an essay, enjoying the stillness of the empty building. When I finally packed my backpack and walked down the main corridor toward the side exit, the heavy metal doors leading to the indoor pool gym swung open. Chloe stepped out, blocking my path with a wide, mocking smile. Behind her stood Sam, locking the exit doors behind me with a heavy brass key he had stolen from the janitor's office. Marcus stepped out from the shadows near the trophy cases, his shadow stretching long across the polished floorboards. Seeing that pendant in Marcus's dirty palm sent a cold spike through my heart. I asked him softly to give it back, keeping my voice steady, my eyes fixed on his. Marcus just laughed, tossing the silver charm from hand to hand like a cheap toy. He told me that if I wanted it back, I had to fetch it. Before I could process his words, Sam grabbed my left shoulder, attempting to pin my arm behind my back. In less than a microsecond, my muscle memory kicked in. My body instinctively shifted into a low posture, ready to sweep Sam's leg and shatter his knee with a side strike. But then my grandfather's voice echoed in my head, "True mastery is restraint." The smell of chlorine hit my nose instantly. The pool room was dimly lit, the water shimmering under the faint fluorescent fixtures attached to the high ceiling. Rain pounded hard against the glass skylights above, creating a deafening rhythm that drowned out any noise from inside the building. Marcus walked slowly toward the deep end, hovering right over the 9-foot mark. He dangled the silver cherry blossom charm over the water, looking back at me with eyes full of arrogance. He said that quiet girls like me needed to learn how to swim with the big fish, and that if I wanted my... Before I could move toward the edge, Marcus and Sam lunged forward. They didn't just push me, they grabbed my jacket and shoved me with full force off the deck. I fell into the air, hitting the cold water with a loud splash that echoed off the concrete walls. As I submerged, the heavy fabric of my hoodie absorbed the water, weighing me down like lead. I let myself sink, staying perfectly still beneath the surface to conserve oxygen, just as I had been trained during cold water endurance exercises back in Japan. Up above, Marcus, Chloe, and Sam leaned over the aluminum bleach. Under the surface, my vision was clear. I reached down, grabbed the silver charm from the tile floor, and clenched it tightly in my left fist. Then, I flexed my shoulders, unzipping my heavy, waterlogged hoodie and letting it sink to the bottom like an old skin. Beneath the baggy clothes was the lean, defined muscle frame of a trained martial artist. I kicked my legs with calculated precision, rising through the water without making a sound, moving like a shadow toward the shallow end stairs. When my head broke the surface, I didn't cough, and I didn't gasp. The three of them stopped laughing. The transition from a panicked victim to a calm, motionless presence caught them completely off guard. Marcus stared at me, his phone still recording, his smile fading into a look of irritation. He couldn't process why I wasn't crying, why my eyes weren't filled with terror, but instead held a cold, unwavering focus that made him take a half step back without realizing it. Chloe took a step behind Sam, sensing the sudden shift in the air. Marcus tried to cover his hesitation with anger, stepping forward and barking at me to drop the pendant and get on my knees to apologize for making him look stupid on camera. He didn't know that my grandfather had spent 3 years teaching me the philosophy of pressure points and kinetic transfer. He didn't know that when an opponent steps forward with their right foot, their center of gravity shifts entirely to the left hip, leaving them completely vulnerable to a swift counterstrike. Sam was the first to move, stepping up to grab my arm again, shouting that I needed to know my place. He reached out with an open hand, expecting me to cringe. I didn't move an inch until his fingers were 2 inches from my collar. In a fraction of a second, I stepped inside his reach. My palm struck the center of his chest with precise, explosive force, driving the wind completely out of his lungs. Before Sam could even gasp, I swept his front ankle with the heel of my foot, redirecting his momentum so that he flipped over my hip and landed hard on his back against the wet tile floor with a loud crack. He lay there, clutching his ribs, gasping for air, unable to comprehend how a girl half his size had sent him flying without taking a single step backward. Chloe let out a sharp scream, dropping her phone onto the bleachers as it shattered against the metal. Marcus froze, his mind struggling to connect the image of the weak, quiet freshman girl with the warrior standing before him. His face twisted from confidence to pure, raw fury. He roared, charging at me like a linebacker, throwing a heavy, wild right hook aimed straight at my jaw. To him, it was a fight, to me, it was moving in slow motion. I dipped beneath his swinging arm, my body gliding smooth as silk across the wet surface. As he overcommitted, I delivered a rapid double strike to his ribs, followed by a palm heel thrust directly into his chin. The impact sent Marcus staggering backward toward the edge of the pool. He lost his balance on the slick tiles, his arms flailing frantically in the air as he tried to regain his footing. I reached out, grabbing the collar of his jacket just before he went over, holding him suspended right over the 9-foot drop. He hung there, breathing heavily, his eyes wide with genuine horror as he looked down at the dark water, then up into my... The silence in the indoor pool was absolute, broken only by the rhythmic thrum of the rain against the glass roof above us and the heavy, ragged gasps of Sam still trying to catch his breath on the floor. Marcus was trembling. The cold reality of his absolute helplessness had washed away every trace of his former arrogance. He gripped my wrist with both hands, his knuckles turning white, terrified that if I let go, he would crash into the water below. He begged me not to drop him, his voice cracking, shedding the tough persona he had spent years building at the expense of everyone around him. I looked down at him, holding his entire weight effortlessly with proper stance and balance. I could have let him fall. I could have let him feel the exact same terror, the same cold humiliation he had inflicted on dozens of helpless kids before me. But as I stared into his terrified eyes, my grandfather's words echoed once again through my mind: violence without purpose is just weakness wearing a mask. Power is not proven by breaking others, it is proven by protecting your own spirit. Dropping him into the pool wouldn't heal my grief, nor would it fix the cruelty inside him. It would only make me like him. Slowly, smoothly, using my core strength, I pulled Marcus back onto the solid concrete deck and set him down on his feet. He sank onto his knees immediately, shivering, staring up at me as if he were looking at a ghost. I stepped back, reaching down to pick up my dripping backpack from the floor. I placed my grandfather's silver pendant around my neck, tucking it safely beneath my shirt, near my heart where it belonged. I didn't yell at them. I didn't utter a single threat or demand that they keep quiet about what happened. Real strength doesn't need to make noise, it simply exists. I walked toward the double doors, stepping past Sam, who scrambled backward along the floor to make way for me, his eyes wide with absolute respect and fear. Before I pushed the doors open to step out into the hallway, I paused and turned back to look at Marcus one last time. I told him quietly that true strength isn't about how many people you can push down, but about how many people you are strong enough to lift up. Then, I walked out into the cool, rain-scented afternoon air, leaving the three of them sitting alone in the quiet dimness of the gym. Word of what happened in the pool never spread across Oakidge High in the way people might expect. Marcus, Sam, and Chloe never spoke a word of that afternoon to anyone. The video on Chloe's phone was deleted, and the loud, aggressive bullying that had plagued the hallways for years came to a sudden, permanent halt. Marcus stepped down as football captain a week later, quietly resigning his title, and for the remainder of the school year, he kept his head down, giving every quiet, solitary student in the halls a wide, respectful berth. As for me, I realized that hiding who I was didn't honor my grandfather's memory. True restraint isn't about suppressing your gifts or living in fear of what others might think, it's about standing firmly in your truth, knowing that you have the power to protect yourself and others whenever it matters most. I stopped slouching in the hallways. I wore clothes that felt comfortable, stopped hiding my face, and even started an after-school martial arts club aimed at teaching confidence and self-defense to kids who had felt small and voiceless for far too long. We often believe that the quietest people in the room are the ones who have nothing to say, or that those who refrain from fighting back are defenseless. But true power never needs to shout, make scene, or prove itself to a crowd. The strongest river is not the one that rages wildly against the rocks, but the deep, quiet current that carves through solid stone without making a sound.